Hi, I'm Claire, and today we're going to look at another BooktubeSFF Babbles topic, Underhyped SFF. I am so excited about this topic in particular because, yelling about books that more people should read is literally why I have a YouTube channel, and I think I'm not alone in that. If you've never seen a BooktubeSFF Babble video or you don't know what I'm talking about, the BooktubeSFF Awards have organized this series of discussion topic called the BooktubeSFF Babbles to just encourage people to talk about various topics. Today, or this week rather, we are focusing on Underhyped SFF, and I'm very excited about this topic in particular because I think, especially if you move in a bunch of different circles like I tend to do, you'll see books that are very hyped in one circle and then not as hyped in another, and it's always a bit weird. There are books that get talked about a lot on BookTube but then don't really get discussed as much in SFF literary con-going fandom, and then don't get a lot of traction at SFF literary awards like the Hugos or the Nebulas, and then you'll see the inverse as well, books that I think a lot of SFF, Hugo, Nebula type of people would know about, but then I'm not seeing anybody reading them on BookTube, so I'm very excited to be talking about books that are on either side of this gap. Anyways, let me actually start talking about the books. My first pick is the Arabella of Mars series by David D. Levine. This is one that I feel like is maybe talked about more in SFF literary convention circles because David D. Levine has been writing a lot of short fiction for a long time, so his name is, I think, better known in SFF short fiction reading circles. I've definitely heard about him before I found this book on various podcasts where he was talking about his writing and stuff like that, and I've seen him at panels at Worldcon. He's a great panelist and great book reader, and he definitely seemed to be well known in those circles. But I have barely seen anybody read this book on BookTube, and it is so freaking good. I mentioned this book in a recent video, and somebody told me in the comments that they had bought it because I talked about it, and I just thought this is exactly why I do BookTube. Just for those comments when people say, I got this from the library because of you, I read it because of you, I loved it. Great. This is a wonderful historical fantasy sci-fi steampunky sort of mishmash about a young woman called Arabella who grew up on Mars but was sent back to live on Earth again when tragedy struck her family so that she could become a proper young lady. The problem is, because she grew up on Mars, she does not want to be a proper young lady. She wants to go back to Mars to hang out with her Martian friends. And that is exactly what she tries to do when she hears about a nefarious plot against her brother who is still on Mars. So she runs away from her home on Earth and disguises herself as a boy so she can go on this sailing ship right here, which is sailing to Mars, because sailing between Earth and Mars on a flying sail ship is a thing that you can do in this universe, and there is an automaton navigator for the ship. It's just this wonderful mix of different genres, but also the writing of it. It's just got beautiful prose, and the parts that are kind of historical fantasy-ish comedy of manners on Earth, having to be a proper lady, they read really well in that kind of genre. But then when you get to Mars and there's some Martians and you're looking at the fighting styles of the Martians and their habits and stuff, that's also really well developed. I just really love this book, okay? I think more people should be reading this book. That's it. PSA. Next up, I want to talk about the Descender series of graphic novels, starting with Volume 1, Tin Stars. This is by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen, and I know a lot of you are looking at me right now and going Claire, this is super well known on BookTube, what are you doing? This is very well known on BookTube. A lot of people have been reading and loving this comic. It is so gorgeous. The watercolor style illustrations have to be some of my favorite. This book got no traction whatsoever at the Hugos. For years, I nominated volumes of this book every single time, and every single time it didn't make the shortlist, and every time I was what's going on? This is so good, this is such wonderful sci-fi, and no, it just didn't get any like a recognition in that arena, and that made me sad, so I wanted to yell about it a bit. Descender is a far future sci-fi story set in a world where robots used to be completely ubiquitous. Humans used robots for all the things basically because it is just easier than doing work yourself, so there were robots everywhere and it worked fine until one day, for no reason that anybody could discern, the robots went haywire and started murdering everybody. So the robot insurrection was put down, and now with no explanation as to what happened, people are really afraid of robots, and robots are banned everywhere. Any robot that is found basically anywhere at all is captured and melted for scrap metal, and you know, it's not a fun time to be a robot. But of course our protagonist is a robot. This little guy is Tim21. He is like a companion robot who was made to look just like a little boy, and he lived with a human family on a mining station. But then something bad happened at the mining station. Tim21 went into hibernation and doesn't wake up until many years later. He's looking all over this deserted mining station for his family, hoping that they're going to be okay and that he's going to find them. He does not find them. They are most likely not okay. Other people do find him though, and the story goes from there. The story of Descender has now been fully wrapped up. It is a complete series. There is a new series by the same team called Ascender? How do you say that word? I'm not sure. Anyway, there is a new series that I've yet to start, but I'm very excited to do so. This series, however, I just feel like we could do with talking about it more. I know we talk about it a bunch on BookTube, but everybody could do with talking about this a bit more because it's so good and it's so beautiful as well. I mean, I'm just gonna show you more of the artwork. Like, it's so good. Next up, we've got Offsore and Such by Angela Slatter. This is a wonderful novella about witches that I really haven't heard a lot of people talking about. Now, Angela Slatter is an Australian author who I'm sure is better known in Australia because it is often quite tricky for authors who are from New Zealand or Australia to get published in the US. Crossing these international markets can be difficult, and if you don't have publication in the US, it's often a lot more difficult to get your name out there and to reach more people. The other aspect of why I think this book didn't get as much traction as I think it deserves is that it was one of the very first novellas that Tor.com put out in their Tor.com novella line when they started it a few years back. That line was still proving itself, like they were still proving that the experiment of publishing shorter fiction, of publishing novellas instead of novels, was a valid thing that we would want to have in sci-fi and fantasy. These days I'm seeing a lot of much bigger booktubers talking about Tor.com novellas and hyping them, and I'm super happy to see that because of course it means that more people will hear about these books, but I think at the time we weren't quite there, and so this book kind of flew under the radar, but I absolutely adore it. It is a historical fantasy novella that is set in a kind of like rural, medieval type of village. So it's a fairly traditional fantasy setting, but we are following a woman who is like known to be the village witch. She has actual magic powers. Other people around her don't know that she has actual magic, but they do know that they can get potions and ointments and remedies from her for various things. And you kind of see how she deals with everybody around. And you get this wonderful interplay in the story of the fact that she is an actual witch. She has powers, she uses her powers in the story. But then there is also this whole thing about witch burnings and witch trials and the fact that they were very often used by powerful men who couldn't get what they wanted from women to kind of discipline those women. Like, the men in the village come to her for help and they are quite happy to keep her around when she's helping them, but as soon as she refuses to be helpful, they start going after her for being a witch. You don't really get the impression that they think she's a witch, and they keep going after people who aren't necessarily actual witches as well. It's just such a cool take on that setting and that story that I've never seen before. Our protagonist is a mother. She's an older woman. It's also not something that you see very often. It's just such a wonderful treasure of a book, and I very, very much recommend it. I wish Tor.com would like reissue some of their very, very first novellas from the line to see if they would get more hyped for them now that they've proved that the format works and that people are used to that format as well. This was one of the very, very first novellas that I read, and it is one of the ones that really hooked me onto the format because I thought it was perfectly formed. It wasn't too little, it wasn't too much, it was just a perfect amount of this wonderful story. Next up, we've got another novella. It is Suno Spell by Stephanie Burgess. This is a absolutely delightful historical fantasy romance novella. This is the first in the Harwood Spellbook series, and this is one that a lot of my online SFF friends have read. I've talked to a lot of people online about how great this book is, but I really haven't seen a lot of people talking about it on BookTube. And because it is historical fantasy romance, it's not the type of subgenre of SFF that tends to do really well in the awards, and that's not a reflection on the book. It's just a reflection on the fact that a lot of people will look at two equally good books in terms of quality, but one of them is hard sci-fi and one of them is historical fantasy with romantic elements, and they'll think one of those two books is more serious than the other. And there is a lot there that we could unpack, of course, of why people think that way, but that's not what this video is. More people should just read this book because it is absolutely delightful and it is also really, really smart. This is set in a historical fantasy, Regency type of world where magic is well known and an accepted fact of life. But the thing that makes this a very interesting alternate universe is that like gender roles are kind of flipped. Women are expected to be the cunning political ones and men are expected to be the magical users. So in this world, you would expect a young lady of good education to be training in politics so that she can be in parliament and then marry a mage, someone who practices magic. And we follow, of course, people who don't quite fit in those molds in this series because that's what's most interesting, really. Our protagonist for the first book is called Cassandra, and she is a young woman who was always gifted at magic, interested in magic, and defied convention to train as a magician, except she had an accident and lost all of her magic, and now she's trying to exist in this world, having spent years defying it so she could learn magic, except now she doesn't have magic anymore and she can't actually do things that she used to be able to do. So not only has Cassandra gone from being the first woman magician to not having magic, but she is on her way to like a country house party of the kind that is very common in Regency stories, where her ex-fiance is also going to be there and she's going to have to talk to him, and you know, she's definitely not still in love with him, wink wink. It's just such a delightful book. I'm smiling just talking about it. I can't wait to pick up the sequel. I'm reading like 12 books in April, so probably don't have time to pick up the sequel in April, but I'm gonna try. And finally, one book that is doing very well in the SFF Literary Awards circles, but I've not really heard about on BookTube very much at all, is Catfishing on Catnet by Naomi Kritzer. This book is currently a finalist for the Andre Norton Award for YA in middle grade that is given out at the same time as the Nebulas, and I believe we can now officially call it a Nebula. I think they've said that a couple years ago. I really hope it gets nominated for the Lodestar. At the time I'm recording this, I don't know the Hugo finalist list at all, so when that comes out, I sure hope that I get to see Catfishing on Catnet on the Lodestar list, because I nominated it and I hope it makes it. But I really haven't heard that many people talk about this on BookTube, and I want people to pick this up because this is a book I think that would do so well on BookTube if more people were reading it. This is a YA sci-fi thriller with a near future sci-fi setting with just a little bit more robotics and internet presence in everyday life than we have now. Our main character is called Steph, and she has been on the run with her mother basically for forever. They are hiding from her terrifying stalkery father who is looking for them always. And so because they're in hiding, they've been moving around from place to place, and Steph hasn't been able to make like strong friendships and connections at her schools because basically they move every 3 months. All of her strong friendships are on this social media site called Catnet, which is secretly run by an AI called Cheshire Cat. The currency of choice on Catnet is pet pictures. Cat pictures are preferred if possible, and Catnet is the place that Steph is able to actually like have really strong, meaningful connections with people. But of course they don't really know about her life because she's in hiding. They've never seen a picture of her. They don't really know where she is. They just know that she moves a lot. Except, of course, there is an AI that is secretly running the show and able to kind of see a lot of different things. And that AI wants to help Steph because Steph is its friend. But, you know, it's an AI, so there are things that it struggles to understand. And the story starts when Steph gets to a new school and she starts meeting people who she actually likes a whole lot. And then Cheshire Cat is trying to help and maybe doing a little more harm than good because it doesn't really know what it's doing. And then Steph's new friend from her school and her friends from her clouder on Catnet have to come together to help her out. And it's just this lovely story about friendship, about deep, meaningful online friendships where you talk to people every day. That resonated so hard for me as a person who, you know, is very online, I shall say. There is a little bit of romance in the book, but not very much at all. That's not what it focuses on. It really focuses strongly on the friendships. There is a friendly AI. What more do you want? It is such a delightful book, and I do hope that it keeps doing well in the awards this year because, you know, I just want more people to find out about it and read it. Maybe it's a little bit premature to call this book underhyped because it's not been out for super long. It was out late last year, and, you know, it might yet have way more people reading it, but it's so good. I want more people to be talking about this book. So that's it. These were 5 books that I personally think are a little bit underhyped and could do with more love and praise. I don't know what it says about me that I really struggled to find books that I think are underhyped. Maybe it means I'm basic and I'm only reading like well-known things. I don't know. But I hope you enjoyed this video nevertheless, and please let me know in the comments below if there are any books that you think are underhyped, especially if you think based on what I said in this video that I would love them, because I'm always looking for book recommendations. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check out a previous video on screen right now. And if you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe button that's on my face for a new video from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.